All right, John Lynch says the 49ers have a plan, and yet a lot of people are still very unsettled after reading some of the quotes about what comes next for the 49ers. And I know why. Now, look, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have been a massive net positive for the 49ers. They took over the organization at a time when it had lost direction, it had lost stability, it had lost the ability to just communicate with the public, and it wasn't winning. And they returned winning and stability and respectability to the 49ers organization. And now they're at a major crossroads. And reading some of Matt Barrow's in The Athletic, he talked to John Lynch on the farm, his alma mater, pro day. The 49ers were at Oregon, big contingent reportedly up at Oregon recently. A lot of talent. Dan Lanning had dinner with Dan Lanning, Oregon's coach. But the quote that has gotten rightfully a lot of attention is this from John Lynch. We've got this thing called the draft, and we've got a lot of picks. And I think that the fans should know that we have a plan, and we're going to execute that plan, and we're excited about that opportunity. And, of course, I think the part that makes everybody pause is that a draft plan is usually only so good as a few rounds and definitely only as good as the players that you take and develop. And so when your plan is to develop players that you don't even have yet, you're still a long way from the plan. And, I think part of what makes people uneasy is that the draft is hard to have a plan, like really execute a plan. But there are so many drafts where the Niners have hit on some players that feel like they're beyond the plan a little bit. That's not to discredit. It's just to say that you can really see a plan in volume, the types of players you draft over the course of several years. And early in the draft is where you really get to manipulate a plan. By the time we get to rounds 4, 5, 6, 7, it gets a little harder. And you're just dependent on what everyone else does around you and what players are available and that sort of thing. So if we go back to last year and go, okay, what was the plan? The plan going into the draft was not to draft Ricky Pearsall. There was some question about whether the Niners would make a trade. Would they trade Debo? Would they trade Ayuk? Remember that stuff cropped up in the first and second round and going into the Friday night. But the Niners basically said as much after the draft. We were trying to move out of the first round. There were no takers, so we took a player. Of course, the year before, they didn't have a first. They didn't have a second-round pick. The year before that, they didn't have a first-round pick, part of the Trey Lance thing. Jair Brown seemed like some of the plan or the plan to replace Talanoa Hufanga. He's still in that mix, but it hasn't really worked the way that they would want it to work. Jake Moody, enough said. The Latu development as a tight end, that hasn't worked. 22, no second, no first. The second-round pick of Drake Jackson, have him develop as the next pass rusher next to Nick Bosa, the other side of Nick Bosa. That hasn't worked. 2021, bad process and bad plan. Moved up, traded a bunch of picks, not knowing yet who the quarterback would be. And then, as it turned out, ended up with only bad options. And that didn't go well. And then the development of Lance was all over the map because you're winning and trying to develop at the same time. And that blew up. 2020, they had a plan in 2020. And I know that, the Javon Kinlaw pick at 14 as the replacement for DeForest Buckner. They actually got the 13th pick for DeForest, flipped that pick with Tampa. They draft Wirfs. So you get some flack for that. You get Ayuk at 25. Very good pick. That was a plan, and they executed the plan. They did a trade. They got 2 picks. They got a star receiver. They drafted the DeForest Buckner replacement. The 2020 year is a great example of what John Lynch is talking about. And kind of the counter is that was a really well executed plan. You didn't nail both picks, though. You nailed one pick. The DeForest replacement you didn't quite get. So that's an example of even the best plan can still go haywire. That's the middle of the first round. You still have a lot of control relative to the rest of the draft. And the right player has to be there, and you have to identify him. The year before in 19 got Bosa, obviously, and Debo. That's a good draft. Bosa at number 2. I think you don't get the most credit in the world, but you shouldn't also lose credit. You got the second pick. You can easily miss it. They missed it with Solomon Thomas at pick 3. You got the second pick. They had the right guy. They identified him. They drafted him. Bam, bam, him and Debo. Then you get Drake Greenlaw on the 5th and some other stuff. The other one is 18. Like, they win the coin flip with the Raiders. There's 2 tackles basically available. They have their pick. They take McGlinchey. The Raiders trade out of the pick with the Cardinals. And then the Raiders go back several spots and draft Colton Miller, who has turned out to be the better tackle. It wasn't right away the plug-and-play tackle, but he was the better tackle. Last year, he was 13th in PFF, right or left tackle grades. Mike McGlinchey is not on the team anymore, and he was 35th. So, had the right idea, needed it. Now they got a 5-year. They would argue we got a 5-year starter. We could have been better, but could have been worse. Okay. So again, you might be saying, like, why aren't you giving him credit for the Fred Warner or the Dre Greenlaw? And if they get the scouts and John Lynch and the whole operation gets full credit. But when we talk about plan, I think, plan is more about, like, all right, we've got, pick one, a first, a second, 2 thirds, 2 fourths, 2 fifths. You can talk about the volume of positions you're going to draft there. But right now, the Niners have no idea. They have no idea if they're going to get a better player at 43 or 75. They've got that's their second and their third pick. We could flip a coin right now. And you would think, like, well, you got a much better shot of getting a good player at 43 than at 75. We have no idea where they're going to get the better player right now. Renardo Green last year was pick 64. Dominic Puni was pick 86. Now that's a little closer, but Green shows some promise. Puni's clearly the better player. So I think that's when we go back to people go, okay, there's a plan, but how well are we going to execute this plan? Having the plan, it's not even half of the operation. Having the plan is like, I don't know what percentage. It's not half. Executing the plan, nailing the picks, developing the players. You go back, and I've used these numbers that I crunched last year many times. But why is Kansas City in the Super Bowl again last year, and the Niners are a 6-win team? The way they've drafted rounds 1 through 4 has been far superior. So yes, they have Patrick Mahomes. Yes, they have Steve Spagnuolo. Yes, they have Andy Reid, but they created better depth for themselves. Now, the Niners are in this same sort of window that Kansas City's in now, right? When your quarterback gets paid, it's more important to have your depth from your draft. And the Chiefs have already kind of been Mahomes is older than Purdy, so the Chiefs were down this road a little further. But what this graph is showing, for those listening, is the percentage of games that the teams got from the players they drafted in the first 4 rounds of draft of the 2021 draft, the 2022 draft, and the 2023 draft. So in other words, if you just got drafted last year, then you can play 17 games. How did you play 17 games? If you got drafted 2 years ago, you could play 34 games. Did you play 34 games? So that's what this represents. Of the players that Kansas City drafted in those 3 drafts in the first 4 rounds, those guys played 74% of the available games to them. That's really good. It's significantly better than what the 49ers got at 51%. Now, maybe the Niners roster was older. Maybe the Niners had more vets, and so the young guys didn't get as many opportunities to play. Maybe. Overall draft rounds 1 through 7, Kansas City 20%, almost 20% more of the games played by the not how many games got played by rookies. It's those young guys, those draft classes of the games available to them to play. Did they play? Kansas City, not only did those guys play a bunch of games, but they won while doing it. So that's that scenario where that's where the 49ers need to catch up. And you'd love to say you look back and you've developed, like, one of the things that came out of this article, the conversation that Matt Barrows had with John Lynch, like a guy that we talk about a lot, and Dre Greenlaw gone, is D. Winters. Last year would have been a great year for the D. Winters development. Kind of feels like we're past it. Lynch said D. Winters will be one of the players who competes for the every down weak side linebacker spot. He'll have an opportunity, right? That's not him overcommitting to a guy, and he shouldn't. I mean, he's had opportunities. We'll see if Robert Saleh can get the most of them. He's very excited with D and a lot of players. So very, very, John Lynch is definitely sending the signal there that, they are not viewing D. Winters as the replacement for Dre Greenlaw necessarily, and he really hasn't shown that he's ready for that. At some point, at some point, you do have to do what the Niners are doing. There's no question. Did you see this news on Thursday? DoorDash and Klarna have signed a deal where customers can choose to pay for food deliveries in interest-free installments or deferred options aligned with payday schedules. You can't do that in the NFL. I mean, you can actually, but at a certain point, you have to stop. You have to actually pay off your chicken nuggets, and that time has come for the 49ers. Now, I mentioned this earlier in the week. Is it accidental? Is it on purpose that it comes at a time when they have a schedule that you think I could understand if they think we can win, give ourselves a shot at winning at some level, making the playoffs, maybe getting hot. Is the quarterback going to be able to elevate? You still have some, talented pillars around him. Health is going to be as critical as ever, if not the most critical it's ever been for this organization this year. And we'll look back and find out if the 2025 draft was the one that extended this, pushes back open the Purdy championship window, makes it easy to extend John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan deep into the future, or is it the beginning of the end? Because when you say you have a plan, and I believe they have a plan, but we've watched the Eagles and the Rams weren't great last year, but they were better. They've been better, and they won the Super Bowl. And I think that's such a critical part of this. There is a compounding effect with frustration with the fans and with ownership. You gain equity when you win, when you finish the job and win the Super Bowl, and when you don't, and then you watch rivals do it, and you watch the Rams do it, and you watch the Eagles do it, it compounds the frustration. Um, I've said this. If you show me you can get to the Super Bowl multiple times with different rosters, I think you've proven that you're around the ball enough. Keep rolling the dice with you, and eventually you'll break through. But when it's real money being spent by fans, when they're spending their money, their hard-earned dollar, by the owner, you start to feel like, well, maybe this guy can't. And that's not how I feel about John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. I've said that many times. I think they can, but they haven't. And if they're going to, then this plan needs to hit.